Your Excellency, Mr. President, Your Excellency, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. I congratulate you, Mr. President, on your election to preside over the deliberations of this August 72nd Assembly of the United Nations. My delegation pledges full support to you and your Bureau. Allow me to convey warm fraternal greetings from His Excellency Dr. John Pombe Joseph Magufuli, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, who wished to be here but due to other pressing commitments at home is unable to attend this session of the Assembly. President Magufuli has sent me to assure this Assembly that his government will continue to support the United Nations and its noble mandate to promote global peace, security, freedom, and development. We also wish to extend Tanzania's unwavering support and cooperation to the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, as he continues to discharge his duties. Mr. President, my delegation pays tribute to your predecessor, His Excellency Ambassador Peter Thompson, for the exemplary leadership during the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly. His tireless efforts in promoting the implementation of Agenda 2030, his dedication to resolving the plight of refugees and migrants, and in reviving consultations on the reforms of the United Nations, particularly of the Security Council. His contribution will remain part of his enduring legacy to this Assembly. We are confident that you and your team will advance from where Ambassador Thompson left, as you have pledged in your opening statement. Mr. President, the world today is facing a myriad of challenges, which include new and old threats, such as international terrorism and other international crimes, persisting poverty, hunger, climate change, as well as global inequalities in economic and social status among nations. These challenges call for a common and urgent response by the entire United Nations system and the international community as a whole. It is in this regard that my delegation welcomes the theme of this session, focusing on people striving for peace and a decent life for all on a sustainable planet. This theme is timely and welcomed, as most of our countries are adjusting their development strategy and plans to ensure the speedy and timely implementation of the goals and targets enshrined in Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. Mr. President, striving for peace and a decent life for all on a sustainable planet should focus on ending poverty, promoting economic and social prosperity, addressing inequality and injustices, as well as tackling the adverse impacts of climate change. This can be achieved by successfully implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. Cognizant of this fact, Tanzania has integrated the Sustainable Development Goals into the second phase of the 5-year Development Plan 2016 to 2021, focusing on industrialization on the basis of complementarity between the agricultural sector and the industrial sector. This plan is one of our tools for the realization of our national development vision 2025, which seeks to reach a medium income stature for our country, Tanzania. In collaboration with development partners and other stakeholders, we have developed frameworks for implementing the SDGs, which include communication and dissemination strategies on the SDGs to make the goals understood to everyone. Dissemination is in both English and Kiswahili, our national language spoken by all Tanzanians. Sensitization workshops on SDGs are also being conducted to regional administrations and local government authorities so that the goals can be mainstreamed in their local plans and budgets in order to directly involve and benefit the ordinary people who are the main focus of the 2030 agenda. Mr. President, Tanzania has set a target growth from an average of 7% in 2015 to 10% by 2020 in order to reach a middle income status by 2025. We also believe that this growth will permit efforts to promote equality in society by reducing the unemployment rate from the current 10.3% to 8% and a reduced proportion of population below the poverty line. This growth can be achieved by, among other things, increasing employment in both rural and urban areas, providing financial support through soft loans to youths and women. Other measures include strengthening small and medium enterprises, securing fair taxation and fiscal regime from business entities, as well as restoring discipline and accountability. Fighting corruption, financial discipline, and accountability in all sectors is the hallmark of President Magufuli's government. Mr. President, climate change has become an existential challenge to our planet Earth. All parts of the world are increasingly experiencing the adverse impact of climate change manifested in persistent droughts, land degradation, coastal erosion, ocean temperatures rise, extreme weather patterns such as cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes, and floods. In Tanzania, for instance, it is disheartening to witness the epic snows and glaciers of Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa, melting at an alarming rate. Against this background, I would like to express my government's heartfelt sympathies and condolences to our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, South Asia, Mexico, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, the United States of America, and all around the world who have recently been victims of the disastrous impact of climate change. Our thoughts and prayers are with those who have lost their lives and those who have been dispossessed and displaced. For all of us, this should be a wake-up call and a reminder that climate change has no boundaries and can potentially wipe off economic and development achievements in a blink of an eye. Therefore, the sooner we act, the better chances we have to protect the planet Earth for the present and the future generations. Mr. President, it is fortunate that we have the Paris Agreement that already entered into force in November 2016 to address this problem. To honor our joint efforts that gave birth to the Paris Agreement under the leadership of France, we should implement in letter and spirit all its articles. Assistance to developing countries should go beyond mere mitigation measures and target adaptation measures with built-in green technologies to control carbon emissions from the outset. Mr. President, violent conflicts continue to plague the world and they remain a challenge to the United Nations and the Security Council in particular, which has the primary responsibility of maintaining international peace and security. They claim thousands of lives and lead to massive displacement and flights of people in search for safer places. We need to invest more on conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and mediation efforts by addressing the root causes, precipitating and triggering factors to conflict. Peacekeeping, peace building, and state building are essential in the maintenance and consolidation where peace has been secured. We commend the role of the United Nations in spearheading these peace initiatives. Mr. President, striving for peace should be a collective endeavor involving governments, international organizations, regional blocs, non-state actors, religious groups, civil societies, and individuals as well. Sustainable peace and security is a prerequisite for the achievement of sustainable development. In this regard, we commend our men and women in blue helmets who are sacrificing their lives to serve the heroic cause of peacekeeping. Tanzania, with the other countries, has been contributing troops to several UN peacekeeping missions. We have paid a high price by the loss of peacekeepers serving in different missions. It was only this week Tanzania lost its soldier in the DRC following an attack from the ADF rebels. We condemn this cowardly act in the strongest possible terms. Nonetheless, Tanzania remains steadfast and committed to continue contributing troops to UN peacekeeping missions. At the same time, we urge the United Nations Security Council to continue strengthening operational capability of the Force Intervention Brigade in MONUSCO in the DRC in order to be able to effectively deal with negative forces and asymmetrical warfare, which is manifesting itself in different war theaters in the eastern DRC. Mr. President, Tanzania has maintained its record as a peaceful country, upholding the rule of law, democracy, and other principles of good governance. It has been a country of refuge for many decades. At the same time, Tanzania has been actively participating in regional and international peace initiatives, including the ongoing Burundi peace process, which has been supervised by the East African Community, facilitated by the former President of Tanzania, Mr. Benjamin William Mkapa, and mediated by His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. The peace talks are still on track, albeit they are slow and halting pace. It is encouraging to note that in some parts of Burundi, the security situation has significantly improved to permit the voluntary return of some 12,000 refugees out of an almost 250,000 refugees who have been in Tanzania since 2015. We appreciate the partnership we have had with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in protecting and assisting the refugees in our country. Mr. President, Tanzania has for decades been receiving and hosting refugees from pockets of troubled areas in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We trust that there will be full implementation of the December 31st peace agreement of 2016 with the promise of timely elections in that country. We urge the DRC leadership to live up to that commitment and to issue an election calendar soon. In this regard, we urge the international community to extend both logistical and financial support to the DRC to complete the registration of voters' register and carry out expeditiously the planned elections. Mr. President, on the agenda of the General Assembly and the Security Council of the United Nations, there are two protracted problems which require decisive action. One is the issue of the self-determination of the Sahrawi people. With the return of Morocco into the African Union fold, expectations are high in Africa that negotiations on this issue, which is on the agenda of the Security Council, will receive renewed momentum and urgency. Mr. President, on Palestine, we support the two-state solution, living side by side in peaceful coexistence. To that end, the elements of a viable Palestinian state must be ensured and respected. The long-stalled peace process in the Middle East must be rekindled with a series of acceptable confidence-building measures by both sides, with support and guarantee of the United Nations and the international community in its entirety. Mr. President, we have in this Assembly been calling for the cessation of economic, commercial, financial, and other embargoes imposed on Cuba without significant results. The intention of the United States to revise the agreements between the two countries on normalizing relations is a setback to the progress that had been registered and applauded by all of us in this same Assembly and beyond. Tanzania continues to call for the total removal of all embargoes on Cuba. The people-to-people contacts that have started between the people of Cuba and the people of the United States should serve as building block for enduring peaceful good neighborliness in the spirit of dialogue and understanding. Mr. President, after the end of the Cold War, there was a new dawn and bright prospects for both conventional and nuclear disarmament. The doctrine of nuclear deterrence was becoming obsolete. Negotiation of reduction of nuclear arsenals was making progress towards a nuclear ban treaty, including nuclear testing, and some aspirants for nuclear weapons abandoned their ambitions. However, the recent developments in the DPRK have shattered these optimistic prospects. The world is being dragged back to nuclear brinkmanship. This is the most recent threat to international peace and security. Tanzania supports all relevant resolutions of the Security Council on the nuclear weapons trends in the DPRK and calls for the de-escalation of the political warfare and propaganda and the renewal of the dialogue under the auspices of the Six Parties Initiative. On the other hand, Tanzania commends the recent adoption of the Nuclear Ban Treaty, which puts nuclear weapons in the same legal ground as other weapons of mass destruction. We should all support this treaty in order to increase our moral authority in the fight against nuclear weapons proliferation. Mr. President, the reforms of the United Nations. To make the organization more efficient and relevant to cope with the new trends and challenges must be continuous and progressive. The latest initiative by the Secretary General is a commendable effort which should have been receiving a consensual support by the entire UN membership. We hope in the process for implementing these latest reform proposals, the debates will be all-inclusive and progress will be made on the basis of consensus by the entire membership of the United Nations. The delay in the reform of the Security Council is indeed testing the political will of the key players on this matter. The debate on this serious matter has now become routine and sterile. The status quo is undercutting the primary responsibility of the Council in the maintenance of international peace and security. Democratizing the Security Council is good for the Security Council and is good for the world in the 21st century. Mr. President, in conclusion, I wish to return to the 2030 agenda by giving a clarion call to the United Nations and its member states to implement the goals contained therein in a measured and agreed benchmarks and intervals. The economic and social benefits from well-implemented goals will enhance democracy, freedom, and security at the national, regional, and international levels without leaving no one behind. I thank you, Mr. President.